Hello everyone and welcome to the Tank Club. Today we're diving into the Elder Scrolls Online Endless Archive and we're going to be showing you a nice little tank build that you can use to progress through the archive and go as far as possible. We've been using this build for quite a few runs now, we've got quite far through the Endless Archive using it, so I hope you can make use of this build to help you and your partner progress through the Endless Archive as well. Now when you are doing Endless Archive during Arc 1 and 2, you might notice that it's quite easy, and so playing a more hybrid style build might be more suitable. So today we're going to be using a Dragon Knight tank. During the early arcs you might want to kind of convert more into the Accolade Dragon Knight hybrid tank build, so you might have seen that in the past. If you haven't, you can see it on the website or you can see the video for that as well. The links are in the description below. And then as you get sort of to Arc 3, 4, 5 and further, you need to focus more into tanking, because even the light attacks will start to hit for 15k, 20k. Things start to hit really hard. At that point you can obviously not run a hybrid style build. So being more of a tank in those arcs after Arc 3 is definitely more important, but not a conventional normal tank that you might have seen previously in dungeons, trials and arenas. It is worth noting that you should try to vision tanking in Endless Archive as a different piece of content to everything else. It's just you and potentially one other player, so you'll need to rely on your own ability to survive, sustain, and a little bit less on providing lots and lots of different buffs and debuffs compared to what you usually do in that dungeon and trial environment. But you still need to be giving out beneficial effects to yourself and to your group mate as well if you can. And that's what we're going to try and achieve here today with this build. So the reason for using a Dragon Knight tank is because the Dragon Knight just has great utility on offer. And a couple of the things that you're going to find really beneficial are chains. Chains has got such a huge range. It's such a great way to keep aggro of enemies as well, while also kiting and giving yourself a speed boost. So maybe when you've got Marauders in, maybe they do a lot of damage because you're on quite one of the later arcs, you might want to just kite it a bit. So chaining it and running, getting that speed boost can be really helpful. Other things that the Dragon Knight has on offer are the passives that you get with the Dragon Knight are incredible. Every time you use your ultimate, you're going to get all your resources back. So we're going to really focus a lot of attention into that piece of detail there, is we want to get our ultimate back fast. We're going to be focused heavily into ultimate regeneration to get our ultimate back, so we can cast our ult, we can get our resources, and we can get lots of benefits. The Dragon Knight also has Igneous Shield, which you can provide to yourself and your group mate to give yourself a damage shield, reduce your incoming damage, along with the other nice little buffs that you get as well. And the Dragon Knight is just very well suited to this piece of content thanks to those particular skills and the passives that are available. You can obviously tank this with other classes, but from what I've experienced myself so far, trying out a few different things, the Dragon Knight definitely seemed to perform the better of the options available. When it comes to your race in the Endless Archive, obviously the Nord is always going to be a solid option. Having that extra resistance really helps. The extra stats on your health and your stamina are very helpful. So the Nord is obviously a great choice to go for with a Dragon Knight. Most people have probably already got a Nord Dragon Knight tank as well, so that is going to be good to use. Anything that provides resistances, anything that provides additional magic recovery or cost reduction is going to have some benefit when you're doing the Endless Archive. For my attributes, I have split these 15 into Magicka, 34 into health and 15 into stamina. You could put them all into health if you can contend with much lower stamina and Magicka pulls. Obviously they're going to dip down a little bit, so that can be a little bit tricky, especially as you go through like harder block phases with some of the tougher bosses. It can be tricky to sustain that. The magic recovery when using a potion goes up quite high, so we get 2,917 magic recovery when we use a potion. That is really valuable. When we buff up with our resistance buff, we're on the resistance cap virtually with 33.4k spell and 32.7 physical. We've got a 72% block mitigation, a 1,000 block cost, and the food we're using today will be red Frothgar. And the reason we use this is for that huge gain of max health, nearly 5k, combined with the 450 Magicka recovery, which is also going to be super useful. Another important thing here is the Mundus stone, which is the Atronach. For even more Magicka recovery, we're going to get 478 additional Magicka recovery with this Mundus. One of the other foods that you could use would be Jewels of Misrule if you wanted to go with something a little bit different. That's going to give you increased max health, but it's going to be less. But you are going to get stamina recovery as well as the Magicka recovery. So you'll get a little bit less Magicka recovery, but you get the addition of stamina recovery. And some people might find that useful if you're going through phases where you're not blocking for a long period of time, you'll be able to get the benefits of that stamina recovery. But for a Dragon Knight in this environment with higher Magicka recovery, you might be able to get away with not doing it because you're going to be casting your ult more, you're going to be casting Igneous Shield, you're going to be getting a lot of stamina gain from other sources, so it's less important to do that. When it comes to your potions, you do need potentially 3 options. So the 2 main ones are obviously going to be your Essence of Health, which gives you health, magicka, stamina, and all your recoveries as well. The Essence of Immovability potions are a great survival tool. So this is going to make you immune to knockback and disabling effects for 10 seconds. The reason why that's so important, if your group mate dies, how are you going to get the res? Well, you're going to use immovability potions, you're going to pop that, and then you're going to get the res on your teammate so that you can continue going through the archive. Really, really important to have these available. You're not going to use these the entire time, but you just want them to be available for those moments where if your teammate dies, you can pop up a movable pot, you can use your ultimate, you become unkillable, and you cannot be knocked back for that 10 seconds there so you can get a res. And that's going to be really important for a long-term progression through the archive. Another great potion here would be the minor heroism potions to get more ultimate back. You're going to combine that with one of your gear sets that's going to give you lots and lots of ultimate, and that way you'll be able to get your ult back faster, you can use it more often, you can get your resources back, you can protect yourself, prevent yourself from dying, give your group mate a damage shield. Lots and lots of things are going to be beneficial by doing that as well. Okay, then we're going to move on to the gear, and we've kind of got 2 different setups that you can go with. The setup I'm using here is probably the more accessible one that most people will probably have already, and this is something that I've been using as well and got quite far through the archive using it. So our first gear set is Pearlescent Ward. Now the reason why we use this is for the 5-piece bonus. Obviously we've got some nice other items in there. We've got increased max health, minor Aegis, healing taken, more max health. But the main reason we use this is both for you and your partner. So you're going to give an increase of 180 weapon and spell damage, and it's a huge aura buff. So it's something you don't have to maintain. So it's got a much bigger range on it than Powerful Assault. It's much easier to maintain than Powerful Assault. It's much better for your resources because you don't have to do anything. So it's just there all of the time. The main reason for using this, however, is for the second part. So it increases your damage reduction by 66%. So because there's only 2 of you, if one person dies, you're going to have a 66% damage reduction. Now this is more important probably for your group mate than it is for you, because if your group mate dies, you can already pop your ultimate, pop your potion, get the res. It's going to be possible. But if you die as the tank, the other player is going to be taking a ton of damage. Now when you die, you're still able to provide the buff from this gear set, so giving your partner a 66% damage reduction so they can res you is going to be very valuable. But it's still going to work for you as well, it's still going to be useful for you. Combined with the other things, it just means it's going to be even easier to get the reses. The other gear set we're going to use is Drake's Rush, and the reason again for this is we're going to get increased max health, we're going to get max stamina. We're only using this on the back bar, so when we're on the back bar, we'll have increased stamina, and we'll also gain a lot of ultimate for both us and our partner. So when you bash an enemy, unit up to 3 group members within 15 meters gain major heroism for 12 seconds, granting 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds, and this can occur once every 18 seconds. So you're able to give you and your group mate a ton of ultimate, just pretty much rocking through most of the time. So you just proc this on the back bar with a bash, and then you're going to get ultimate gain. Your partner's going to get ultimate gain. Your partner can then drop more ultimates on the enemy to kill them faster. You can provide more benefits and buffs or protection to yourself and your group mate as well. So this is going to be a fantastic gear set to use through the archive. For this setup, I have gone with a monster set, so Archdruid. Again, we've got some nice options here. The offensive pen isn't really particularly useful, but when you deal damage with a heavy attack, shock damage, you cause major vulnerability for 7 seconds. It just means when you've got enemies that need to die fast, especially things like infusers or marauders and bosses, you give them a quick heavy attack, they're going to be applied with major vulnerability, and this is great because it's just a 2-piece gear set. So yes, the uptime is not amazing, it's 7 seconds, it can be procced every 15 seconds, but it's the fact that it's a 2-piece gear set and it gives a nice big damage buff for just 2 pieces of gear, so it's well worth using. And then the final piece of gear is the Master's One-Hand and Shield, the Puncture and Remedy set. It's going to give us increased healing taken, which is really useful, especially because we've only got ourselves to rely on. Maybe some off healing from our group mate as well, but then when you deal damage with Puncture, you heal. Big heal, 5.7k. This also gets buffed up when you do Igneous Shield and all those other things that will increase your healing received and healing done. So you get that increased heal, you get increased resistances, and it's going to be really, really nice for increasing your survival, and especially because Puncture is a really cheap stamina skill, and you only stamina skill with this build as well. It means that when you do need to get an extra heal, if you have burnt out your magicka, if you haven't got a potion, if you haven't got your ultimate ready, you can just hit a couple of punctures for that very cheap stamina amount and get an additional heal as well. Now, some of the other gear you could use here, which is also great, you could take away the monster set if you weren't so keen on providing that, and you could use some Drake's Rush or Pearlescent Ward on the head and the shoulders, so that you can use the Blessing of Potentates, jewelry, and staff. So you could use the ice staff and then one piece of jewelry from the Blessing of Potentates. And the reason why you'd use this is because for a 3-piece bonus, you get 15% reduced cost of ultimate. And it's a really, really strong piece of gear to allow you to give more ultimates more often, because it's cheap. 15% cheaper is going to be really valuable in the Endless Archive. So that is an option as well. If you do go with that option, you would have to do Pearlescent Ward on one bar. You'd have to do Drake's Rush slightly differently. You'd maybe put Drake's Rush on your one hand and shield, along with 2 jewelry pieces and then 1 body piece, maybe the head, so you can fit in Blessings of the Potentates. Now, by doing this, you'd also have space for a mythic item, and for this particular environment, I do really like Bloodlord's Embrace. So I wouldn't usually advise people to use Bloodlord's Embrace for a tank, but when it comes specifically to the Endless Archive, it's very intensive on your resources when you get to the latter stages, when you get through to those harder rounds, those much more difficult arcs. And having Bloodlord's Embrace, when you can apply it to a Marauder, apply it to a boss, apply it to some of the harder hitting adds, such as, like I say, the Infusers and things like that. You apply it to that, you're going to get incoming Magicka, which is going to help you to survive because you'll be able to cast Igneous Shield more, you'll be able to cast your heal more, you'll be able to cast Frost Clench more. So this is going to be a really useful set for that. And if you did want to stick with the monster set option as well, you could use a different monster set. Maybe if you're having problems with sustain, use a bit of Engine Guardian. It really, really depends on how you want to play this. Another good option would be to use the Spalder of Ruin, because you're only going to have one other person, so it's only going to reduce your resources by a very small amount compared to when you're in a 4-person group or when you're in a trial group. When you use Spalder of Ruin, it does reduce your recoveries by quite a lot, but with just one other person, it's going to be a very, very small amount. So definitely something that's manageable, but damage isn't the full 100% focus in the archive, because you've got to be self-reliant. When it comes to your passives and your enchants, for me on the main hand, I've gone with Defending just to get me to the resistance cap. I could go with Infused as well if you wanted to buff up your enchant. I did go with the Absorb Stamina enchant here just to give me that little tick of stamina now and again, just to kind of make sure that I can keep casting my Pierce Armor, make sure I've got enough resources for blocking and roll dodging and breaking free and all that kind of stuff. So having extra stamina is always going to be useful. Infused Crusher on the Ice Staff to reduce the enemy's resistances by 2108. That's important because obviously we need to make sure we're able to maximize the amount of damage we're doing on the enemy by reducing their resistances. For the other gear, we have just got a split of Divines and Reinforced. Most of the pieces are Divines. I have got in there the Reinforced Chest, the Reinforced Shield, but the Divines is there because we want to have as much Magicka recovery as possible. By having more Magicka recovery, we can cast our skills more often. It's going to be really valuable to do that as a Dragon Knight tank especially. And then the Reinforced pieces, the 2 Reinforced, are helping us to reach that resistance cap as we saw before. On the jewelry, I've gone with 3 Infused and 2 Magicka recovery, 1 Magicka cost reduction. Don't want to stack too much cost reduction because there is a real quick point where it reaches diminishing returns where you start to get less and less benefit by doing that. I also didn't want to go with tri-cost reduction because I'm only using 1 stamina skill, so there was no value in doing that. And I'm using 1 health skill as well, so I didn't really see the point, but pretty much all my skills are Magicka costing. And by using this, I also take my cost of Ashcloud down to virtually 0. It's also really good for making sure that you're kind of reducing that cost so you can cast more often, but we also want enough recovery to be able to maintain that. There's no point focusing into cost reduction if you can't sustain doing it. So cost reduction is better for when you're spamming skills, recovery is better for when you've got that more sensible kind of thorough approach to when you're using skills, timing skills, but making sure you got recovery. It's good to have a combination of both, and from my experience in the archive, it was definitely useful to have a little bit of cost reduction there, but mostly we're focusing into recovery. Okay, next we're looking at the skills, and we have Pierce Armor as our first skill. Very cheap stamina skill. It procs our Master One-Handed Shield, it taunts the enemy, it applies Major and Minor Breach. This is going to be really important. Some of the enemies in here have got tons and tons of resistance, so we need to do our best, the best as we can to reduce that resistances down, and obviously we need to keep aggro of enemies, so this is really important. Next we've got Choking Talons. Now this is kind of a flex spot if you didn't want to use this, but I have found it to be quite useful because a lot of the enemies that you chain in, especially the mages, as soon as they get pulled in, they'll run back off again. So it's nice to run into an ad pull and just use this And it's really good as well because sometimes it's too difficult to taunt things quickly. Sometimes you'll have like 8 enemies and they'll all be running at your partner. And so if you could just talons them really quickly so that it gives you a little bit of respite so you can get a taunt. You've got 4 seconds then to quickly taunt a couple of those adds before they run off again. It really, really helps. And it will also inflict minor maim, which is just going to reduce a bit of the damage that they do as well. The synergy that's provided by this is quite a good synergy for the damage dealer. So if they're able to activate it, they're going to do flame damage. And that can be quite a useful little tool to add a bit more damage into your damage dealer's kit as well. Next we move on to Igneous Shield, and this is a really, really good skill. It's not going to provide as big of a damage shield for your partner, but it is going to give something. So 3,446 damage shield to your ally. It's going to give you an 8.6k damage shield as well. Scales off your max health. You've also got that major mending, which is fantastic, and it's going to buff up your healing. And then it's really your Earth and Heart passives that are really beneficial here. So we get the increased duration, we get the Battle Roar passive. The Mountain's Blessing is going to provide that minor brutality. It's going to give you some ultimate as well. And then Helping Hands is going to give us 1,120 stamina. So every time we cast Igneous Shield, we're not just benefiting from the damage shields and the major mending, we're also getting minor brutality for our partner, we're getting ultimate, and we're getting 1,120 stamina. So lots and lots of things that go into this skill. Next we've got Green Dragon Blood, and again this is now probably the better heal out of the two. Green Dragon Blood is going to give you a heal of 34% of your missing health and an additional 1,318 health every 1 second over 5 seconds. It's also going to give you major endurance, major fortify, minor vitality, so it's going to give you increased recovery, increased healing received. You get that nice little ticking heal over time, and this is a burst heal, so you only want to save this for those drastic moments where you're getting absolutely damaged like crazy. And you always cast this after Igneous Shield, so you buff yourself up with Igneous Shield, and then you cast Green Dragon Blood. And that way you'll get a much bigger heal. And you don't want to use this too much because it is going to cost nearly 4,000 magicka to use it. So you don't want to be spamming this. You don't want to be using this when your health is too high. Obviously you want to be using it when you're below 50% max health. And you ideally want to try and save it for those moments. Apart from if you've got a boss that's about to heavy attack you, you're going to have to use it sooner. But definitely try not to spam cast this too much. And we're going to cover this in a second as well. We've also got Unrelenting Grip as our next skill, and this is super useful now, especially for the Endless Archive, because you can chain enemies in and then it's going to taunt them. So you're going to do flame damage, you pull enemies in, you get major expedition. It's doing a lot of things. It's going to restore magicka if you don't pull an enemy in, so this can be good for bosses that are hit really hard, and there's going to be some bosses in the Endless Archive that are actually better to kite rather than try to tank, like a normal situation where you'd be there face tanking it. Sometimes that's just not feasible. And it doesn't make sense to do it either, because by face tanking an enemy, you're going to be spamming your heals, you're going to be using your stamina, you're going to be burning through resources. That might not be an option. Sometimes the better option is to just kind of cast chains on an enemy and run away from it. You get the speed boost, you're able to keep pulling it and taunting it, and that's really useful. In ad pulls, when you stand in the middle of the area, you can just pull things from every direction and then they're aggroed to you. So this is an absolutely vital skill. And one of the really important parts is how big the range is on it as well. It's got a huge range. It's such a big range on this chain that allows you to just pull stuff from all over the place. So very, very valuable. Finally, on this bar, we've got our ultimate. I've gone with Reviving Barrier just as a bit of an emergency. It's going to give a damage shield. It's going to give healing. It's going to be giving us magicka recovery, which is one of the big reasons for using it as well. So we get the benefit of the Magicka Aid passive, giving us 10% increased magicka recovery. There are multiple different options for ultimate on your front bar that you could use. You could slot Warhorn if you did want it to provide a damage boost in those early phases. Temporal Guard is a good option to slot for that minor protection, reducing incoming damage by 5%. Another good option would be Spell Wall, and this is good because it's very cheap. So 135 ultimate. Maybe if you are newer, this could be maybe a better option for some situations because it's going to act like you're blocking when you're not blocking. So this is going to allow you to get resurrections on your ally if they die. It reflects all projectiles back for 7 seconds as well. So this can be really useful. And the fact that it's a cheap cost and every time you use your ultimate you get resources back, this could be used for like lesser experienced players to be able to help with those situations where you need a res, you need to reflect the damage, you want to get some resources back, and it doesn't cost very much. So there's quite a few good things there. That is another option. And if you did want to go down a more damage route, especially in the early phases, Dragon Knight Standard is always a great option for doing a bit of extra DPS. Another flex option for that front bar, like I said, if you didn't want to use Choking Talons, Revealing Flare would be a good option to slot there instead. giving you that major protection, especially when combined with the minor. 15% damage reduction is a lot, so if you wanted to combine those two things together to give yourself increased damage reduction, then that would be another good option. Onto the back bar, we've got Frost Clench. Now that does mean we've kind of got 3 taunts, because we've got Chains, we've got Pierce Armor, and we've got Frost Clench. But this is a fantastic skill, and especially for bosses, and you definitely want to be having it and using it, because it's gonna cause a chilled effect to enemies. It's going to apply minor brittle, major maim, minor maim. It's going to immobilize some enemies, which can be good sometimes. It's a nice ranged taunt, so this is a good skill to have, especially because you just don't know when to expect those marauders. You definitely want to have this for bosses. That damage reduction that you can apply is very, very valuable, so another great skill to have. Overflowing Altar is our next skill, and that is something to help both you and your group. So although this is probably one of the least effective buffs in the game, it's still helpful. So minor lifesteal, you're going to get this, and when you've got things like blockade down, that's just going to automatically tick it. It's going to heal you and your allies for 612 every 1 second when you damage the enemy. So enemies that are within 28 meters of the Blood Altar, you're going to get minor lifesteal. You're going to recover health, basically. And so is your ally. The main reason for using this is actually the Blood Feast synergy. And this is going to be available when somebody's health drops low, and then they're going to have this big synergy, the Blood Feast synergy. And when they press it, they're basically going to go back up to full health. This is something that you really want to maintain at all times. And once somebody uses this synergy, if you see someone's health drop and then they boost back up and they've used this synergy, it's a good idea to replace this down, because then the synergy will be able to be used again. Sometimes the synergy isn't available even after the cooldowns run out on the synergy. Sometimes it's not available, so it's a good idea to refresh this once they have used the synergy, just to make sure it's available again for them when they reach the threshold. So they have to be low on health, and then they can heal for 65% of their max health. Very, very important for helping your group's survival. Next, we've got Blockade of Frost, and this is really good for the damage shield that you provide. A 10k damage shield from projectiles. So you can place this down. When you've got lots of archers, especially at the start of a round, they're going to get hit by this, and that's really, really helpful. It can also be useful to put this down for that minor breach, the AoE minor breach, chilled enemies, having that reduced movement speed, just so you can get control of the battlefield a bit easier, because enemies aren't rushing at your group as fast. So that can be helpful. And then also this is really useful for proccing your back bar enchant. Next we got Hardened Armor. Now I didn't really want to use balance in here, because using balance, sacrificing too much health, especially when we've already got Blood Altar, is going to be a bit of a risky thing. And the fact that if you use balance and then you've got the healing debuff, this is probably an environment, one of the few environments where that is not really a good option. Luckily this is quite a cheap skill, it's a magicka costing skill as well. You're going to get Major Resolve, and you're going to get a 12.7k damage shield. It's also going to return a bit of damage, so this is providing a couple of different things, but it's going to be a really strong buff for you for that Major Resolve, and it's going to give you that huge damage shield, which is really, really helpful. It gives you another option for another damage shield as well alongside Igneous Shield, because they will stack together, so you can have both damage shields active at the same time, which gives you that additional protection. Next we've got Cinderstorm, and this is just a great skill to use for multiple reasons. We've got the cost of it is 26 magicka every 1 second. You put a cloud of ash on the floor, it reduces enemies' movement speed by 70%. So this is like an additional crowd control. This is your snare. So this is like a snare skill. It's going to reduce that movement speed. It's going to, and then you combine that in with your talons as well, and you've got a nice way to control the enemies. But the main reason is it's going to give you and your ally healing. So 1,469 every 1 second. Now this actually is more than that. So if it crits, it's going to be over 3,000 healing every 1 second. When you've also got your Igneous Shield active, this goes up to over 2k. And this is just a cheap, easy, sustainable way to keep your health topped up, because you can't afford to keep spamming healing skills. So by having this underneath your feet, you're just constantly able to give yourself a constant tick of healing, and a really good amount of anywhere between 1,500 to 3,500, depending on your buffs or not buffed, whether you're critting or not critting. Like, this is going to give you nice, sustainable way to stay alive and not have to keep burning through resources to keep healing. The final skill is one of the really important ones here, Magma Shell. Now this is going to cost 200 ultimate. Like I said before, if you wanted to change the build slightly, go with that Blessing of Potentates, the 3-piece gear set, and that will allow you to instead have a cheaper ultimate cost. And then what you're going to do is use this to stay alive. Use this on bosses, use this during amp pulls. You can just keep using it on cooldown if you wanted to, because it's going to provide some real nice benefits. It limits incoming damage to 3% of your max health. It deals flame damage to nearby enemies for 12 seconds. When activated, nearby allies gain a damage shield for 100% of their max health for 12 seconds. So the reason we use this is because it's cheaper than barrier. It gives you immunity to death pretty much. Incoming damage limited to 3% of your max health, so a very small amount. It just allows you to stay alive. So especially when like you're dealing with those marauders, hard-hitting enemies and bosses, you can just keep casting this, and then you're going to give your ally, your partner, that damage shield. You're going to get reduced incoming damage, and it's just a great way to get through hard fights. It's also really useful if your partner dies, because you can use this, you can pop an immovable potion, and then you can just res them. And it means that you're not going to lose any lives by getting the reses. You can keep going through, and you can progress as far as possible. Now finally, we're moving on to the champion points. Now for your green CP, obviously this is just standard stuff as what you like to use. Obviously good options, Rationer, Liquid Efficiency and Steed's Blessing. On the blue champion points, there's a few different options here. So I've gone with Ironclad, and I've also got the usual kind of Duelist rebuff, Enduring Resolve, and then Bulwark. I'm not a big fan of Unassailable because 6% damage reduction to AoE damage. When you actually look at how much damage AoE damage does, and then take 6% of that away, when you can think about all the other things that reduce damage as well, this is one of the least effective. Depending on how you built up your resistances, you might not need Bulwark, so you could switch in something else. Other good options are going to be things that buff up your healing. So things like Swift Renewal, Focus Mending can be okay, and then definitely Soothing Tide to buff up your healing over time. Obviously we're using Ash Cloud, Green Dragon Blood's also got a heal over time associated with it. So these are both really good options to use instead of the ones we've mentioned. On the red CP as well, we've got Balanced Vitality, we've got Fortified. Crucial one here for me is Spirit Mastery, decreases the time it takes to resurrect an ally by 33%. You could just slot this after Arc 2 when it starts to get a bit more dangerous. You could slot something else before that, but I like to have this available. So far I've mostly ran Endless Archive with random groups that I've created on the Group Finder, and we've managed to get through quite far by me having this available. Having Tempered Soul is good in case you die, so make sure you've got points into there so you get 10% more resources when you res. I personally really like Shield Master to reduce the cost of damage shields by 2% per stage, so 10%. This reduces the cost of multiple skills that we're using, but Igneous Shield being cheaper is really useful. Barrier is also cheaper by slotting this. You could use Bastion instead if you wanted to buff up the damage shield, so this would give you a buff to the damage shield, so your group mate is actually getting a bigger damage shield when you cast Igneous Shield. So that is another option. The final choice would be to use Ward Master. So if you didn't want to use those that I mentioned there, Ward Master would be also a good one, because this is going to give you damage reduction while blocking, and you've got a damage shield active. So when you cast an Igneous Shield and you're blocking, and you've got this, you get a lot of damage reduction. And then everything else, you just want to take everything that does not need to be slotted. Everything that reduces stamina cost of anything, or anything that helps you sustain and survive, you take those, and they're all very, very useful. So just to kind of recap on that, we've got this fantastic build for Endless Archive, and the main focus here is, because you're a Dragon Knight, you're focusing on ulti gain. You're focusing on using your ultimate as much as possible. That helps you to sustain because of your DK passives. Your Dragon Knight passives are absolutely crucial, so you've got to make sure you've got all of those. Make sure you've got your immovable potions, and you're using Magma Shell and things like that. Combining Pearlescent Ward, Magma Shell, immovable potions will allow you to overcome the odds when your partner dies, or if you go through any issues during the archive. That way you can kind of stop, pop the potion, get the res, get back up and carry on where you left off. And I've been able to progress quite far through this myself thanks to that particular setup, and I was able to just get through it and progress and keep going and getting the reses, and it's been a very, very useful tool to get further in this content. If you've got any questions about the Endless Archive or tanking in the Elder Scrolls Online, please make sure you join us on the Tank Club Discord. The links are in the description below. If you'd like to support the Tank Club in any way, you can become a YouTube member or a patron. We've got lots of different tiers and benefits available, including VIP access to different giveaways, our one-to-one help support channel that's only accessible to any subscribers, as well as other perks and benefits. So make sure you check that out. And thank you very much as well to our current YouTube members and patrons. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.